They forgot my birthday again. 30 years old. No calls, no texts, not even a recycled Facebook memory with some half-hearted emoji. But the kitchen was full of noise. My stepsister giggling over candle options. My father uncorking wine like it was a celebration. My stepmother humming in that theatrical way of hers as if the world existed just to admire her presence. The irony was almost impressive. They weren't just ignoring me. They were planning a surprise party for her. I stood in the doorway, unseen. It's easy to disappear in a house where you were never really allowed to exist. It should be something elegant, my stepsister, Natalie said. Not too flashy. She hates when things are about her, you know. I knew. She didn't. I turned away before they noticed me, went back to my room, and shut the door with the same silence I'd learned to perfect over 2 decades. No one would ask where I went. That's when I decided. If they could throw a party and forget who raised their glass first, then I could give them something to remember. I waited until they left for the florist. Then I opened my laptop and made the first call. The restaurant had the name Winford and Grace stitched on its website in gold serif, like it belonged to a classier city. My father booked it every year for special occasions. The staff knew us, or rather knew them. I requested a private room. I changed the reservation name, and I brought the memory of every forgotten year with me. Theme? The manager asked over the phone. I smiled. Let's call it the uninvited one. The day of the party arrived. I left early, not dressed in black, not dramatic, just neutral, as always. The staff led me to the private room. White walls, brass fixtures, table set for 6, a single place at the head, untouched. I brought a box with me, photos they'd left in drawers. Me on my 5th birthday, holding a cake I made myself. Me at a spelling bee where no one came. Me in a hospital bed after surgery, smiling at an empty doorway. I lined the frames along the far wall. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. I had to see my own face. To remember I was here. At 6 p.m., the front door chimed. I stayed out of view. Party for Rachel? The hostess asked. My father frowned. Should be under Margaret Hayes. A pause. Oh, yes. That reservation was adjusted. Private room, this way. I heard the shuffle of coats. Heels. My father clearing his throat. Natalie's voice rising with confusion. And then the door swung open. They stepped inside. And froze. No streamers. No flowers. No banner that read, Happy Birthday, Margaret. Just a small sign on the center of the table, in white block letters, reserved for the forgotten one. And behind it, me. Seated. Calm. Composed. Wearing a necklace my mother left me. The only thing they never took. My stepmother's smile vanished. Natalie's hand went to her chest like someone had shot her. My father? He said nothing, just stared. Please, I said, gesturing to the chairs. You've come this far. Stay a while. No one moved. You were planning to surprise someone tonight, I continued. You just forgot who earned the first celebration. They looked at the photos now, each one labeled with a date. No captions, just evidence. A forensic archive of every year I clapped alone. Natalie broke the silence. Rachel, this is cruel. I stood up. Cruel is when a child makes their own birthday card because no one remembered. Cruel is when you're made to feel ungrateful for existing. I walked past them slowly. No raised voice. No tears. Enjoy the table, I said. It's the only reservation you'll get with me again. And I left. I didn't cry in the car. I drove home with the windows down. That night I slept better than I had in years. Because I didn't need their celebration. I just needed them to know. That silence doesn't mean you're invisible. Sometimes it's the sound of someone remembering everything. You don't realize you've been erased until the outline is gone. Growing up in the Hayes household was like being trapped in the soft focus of someone else's life. From the outside, we looked complete. Father, daughter, stepmother, and a golden girl stepsister who sparkled on cue. But if you tilted the picture just right, you'd see the frame was never meant to fit all four. I was 12 when Margaret Hayes married my father. My mother had died 2 years earlier in a car accident. I was in the back seat. They told me the scars on my collarbone would fade. What they didn't tell me was that the emptiness wouldn't. Margaret arrived like a perfume cloud, polished, graceful, perpetually admired. She came with a daughter of her own, Natalie, all hair ribbons and choreographed smiles. She called my father Dad by the end of the first week. I still said, Sir. He never corrected her, or me. At first, I thought the distance was just awkwardness. Transitions are hard, right? New dynamics, new rules. But the silence around my name stretched longer than politeness could excuse. At school events, Margaret always showed up, flashing camera in hand, cheering Natalie on, baking cookies with her class. Mine? Nothing. I stopped handing out permission slips after 8th grade. They always got lost. Birthdays came and went. I never complained, never asked why Natalie got handmade invitations and bounce houses while I got a passing nod over cereal. I convinced myself it wasn't personal. Maybe they were just busy. By 16, I had perfected the art of invisibility. I learned to slip in and out without echoing on the floorboards. I stopped asking to join them for dinner when I noticed Margaret ordering 2 steaks and something light for herself. Never 4, never one for me. The fridge had a section labeled Natalie's Lunches. My name wasn't on anything, not even in magnets. High school gave me one escape: literature. Books didn't forget your name. I spent weekends at the town library reading women who had been erased and wrote themselves back in ink. I fell in love with structure, how words could cut deeper than voices. And when I earned a scholarship to a nearby university, I packed my bags with no send-off party, no banner, no congratulations. Natalie cried when she left for her first semester at a private college out of state. My father carried her luggage to the car like it was some royal departure. When I left, I took the bus. Even then, I still hoped he'd call. He didn't. College gave me more than space. It gave me silence I could shape. I majored in English Lit, worked 2 jobs, skipped parties. I liked the background. It was familiar, predictable. But I never missed a deadline, never broke a rule. Not because I wanted approval, because I wanted power. The kind of power they couldn't steal. My professors called me brilliant. My roommate called me a ghost. One summer, I returned home to find that my room had been converted into a yoga space for Margaret. My books were boxed. My bed was gone. Storage makes more sense, she said, sipping cucumber water. I stayed in a motel that night. The next morning, my father left $100 in an envelope on the counter. No note. No name. By the time I was 25, I'd stopped attending holidays. I didn't answer their texts, what little there were. No one asked why I wasn't around. They just assumed I had moved on. And maybe I had. But some ghosts don't haunt. They wait. They watch. They learn. So when I saw the email from Natalie last year, an invite to Margaret's 60th birthday, I opened it. Not because I cared, but because I wanted to see what they had remembered. The party was lavish, gold-themed, at Winford and Grace. Same place, same people. No mention of me in the email, just a footnote that said, "Let us know if you're around. Totally casual." I wasn't angry. I was curious. Curious to see how people who called themselves family could forget the weight of a name. Curious how long they could pretend that their picture was still full when half of it had walked away years ago. Curiosity became focus, and focus became planning. Because when your existence has been erased, The most dangerous thing you can do is remember every line. I didn't start planning the dinner to hurt them. Not at first. It started more like an exercise, an intellectual project, a thought experiment. What does it look like when someone takes the script you've been given and rewrites it with silence? I began collecting. The photos came first. They were tucked into old drawers at the house I grew up in, buried beneath board games no one played and books that were never opened. I went back one weekend in early March, under the pretense of checking on things. The guest room was cold. I wasn't offered coffee. While they were out shopping, I opened the closets. There was a shoebox, then another, then a weathered manila folder with my handwriting on the front. Journals, 6th grade. Inside, a list of birthdays, holidays, events, all with asterisks, all marked. No one came. I scanned every page. Not because I needed the proof, but because I knew one day they would. I pulled my own school files from the district archive quietly, under my alum credentials. I requested copies of permission slips and signed forms, the ones never returned. I asked for attendance records on parent-teacher nights. 16 events. 0 signatures. I printed them all. The visual was clean, stark, as sterile as any clinical chart. Then I turned to the photos, the ones from holidays, Natalie with her shiny smile and Margaret in designer scarves. My father at the grill. I was often in the corner, not cropped out, just overlooked. In one, I'm sitting at the kids' table, alone. In another, I'm holding a gift, still wrapped, never opened. I remembered that one. It was the last birthday I spent in that house. I brought the gift myself. They thought it was for Natalie. By April, I had the reservation confirmed. Winford and Grace. A 6-person table converted to a private room. I used my middle name, Elena, and a different email. I didn't want them tipped off. The theme was simple. Muted gold, faded lavender, and ivory frames, nothing extravagant. I told the event coordinator. It should feel like a eulogy, for a memory. She asked me what the occasion was. I said, a reunion. She smiled. Who's it for? Family? I said. Just not the kind that shows up. I kept to myself in the weeks leading up. I didn't engage with them, not that there was much to engage with. Natalie posted about her latest wellness retreat. Margaret uploaded filtered pictures of her garden and candles. My father didn't post anything at all. But he replied to Natalie's dinner plan email with a thumbs up. That was enough. I knew exactly who they were. The kind of people who think silence is forgiveness, that forgetting something long enough means it never happened. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to show them. On the morning of the dinner, I laid everything out. The table settings, the playlist, the order of the photos, and then the cake. I ordered it from a small bakery 2 towns over. White fondant, black script. Simple. To the daughter you forgot to count. The woman behind the counter blinked when she saw it. I smiled politely. It's for a dinner, I said. Not a party. She didn't ask further. When I arrived at the restaurant that evening, the staff led me in through the back. I set up the photos myself, placed the documents on the table with the precision of a court exhibit. The violinist waited quietly in the corner. The lights were dimmed just enough to blur the edges. I sat at the head of the table, wine glass full, hands folded, posture sharp. I wore the same necklace my mother gave me when I turned 10, a silver key. She told me it opened nothing. That was the point. You don't need to unlock anyone, she said. Just keep yourself. I had. They hadn't taken that. So I waited. For the guests. For the silence to arrive. For the moment when forgetting finally had a face. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, because I was ready. The room was chilled, even with the muted gold light pooling onto the tablecloth. 6 chairs, ivory plates, silver cutlery arranged like scalpels. Every seat equidistant from the center where I had placed the cake. No one knew what it was at first glance. The frosting was too perfect, too quiet, but the message was unmistakable. To the daughter you forgot to count. The lettering was hand-piped in black against the white fondant, a subtle contrast, elegant in its restraint. I laid out the photos next, one by one, in exact chronological order along the far wall, just beneath a long mirror that reflected the whole room. There I was, 5 years old, sitting in the backyard with a paper crown made of construction paper. 8 years old, standing alone at a school recital while the other kids had someone filming them. 12 years old, blowing out candles on a store-bought cupcake. The candle wasn't lit. Each photo bore a date. No captions, no explanations. The silence was the point. I didn't want chaos. I wanted discomfort. The kind that simmers in the base of your throat, too dry to swallow, too sharp to ignore. This wasn't revenge made of fire. It was made of ash. At exactly 6:01 p.m., I heard them arrive. I stayed in the shadows of the side hall, watching them through the partition glass as they spoke to the hostess. Margaret in cream silk, Natalie with glossy lips and a ponytail too tight. My father gray at the temples now, thinner than I remembered. They expected soft lighting, champagne flutes, a chorus of surprise. What they got was a woman they hadn't spoken to in months, sitting alone at a table full of history they refused to remember. The hostess gestured politely. Private room just through here. Their steps hesitated, then advanced. And then, silence. I let it stretch. I let them stand in it. Natalie blinked first. Rachel? I didn't rise. I didn't smile. Please, I said, motioning toward the table. You're already here. No one moved. I thought we were having dinner for Margaret, my father said, voice low. You are, I replied. She's here, isn't she? Margaret stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the wall, then the table, then the cake. When she read the inscription, her mouth twitched. Not with guilt, with calculation. This is childish, she said carefully. No, I said. This is archival. I gestured to the photos. That one's from 2001, the day after my appendix surgery. No visitors. That one's from 2005, the spelling bee. You took Natalie to the spa that day. My tone never lifted. My hands never shook. They stared, uncertain now shifting in place. What do you want? Natalie asked, arms crossed. You think this is some sort of power move? I stood then, slowly, deliberately. I want a record, I said. A documented instance where forgetting didn't go unanswered. I moved to the table and picked up a small stack of printed documents, school records, unreturned slips, teacher reports, party RSVPs marked not attending. This is what you left behind when you pretended I never noticed. The silence cracked. Not shattered, just cracked. My father finally spoke. You could have just said something. I stared at him. I did. You just never listened. Margaret stepped forward again. Rachel, we were trying our best. Blended families are hard. You weren't trying, I cut in. You were replacing. And you? I turned to Natalie. You knew, you saw. Every time I waited at the table, every time I stayed in my room while you celebrated your perfect milestones. Her face flushed, but she didn't deny it. Good. That would have been worse. I walked to the cake, picked up the knife. They flinched. Relax, I said, slicing a single, precise line through the frosting. This isn't a movie. I lifted one piece and placed it on a plate. Then I turned to go. You can stay, eat, celebrate, pretend this never happened. But I won't be sitting at your table again. And just before I exited, I paused at the door. The worst thing you ever did wasn't ignoring me. It was making me believe I had to earn being seen. Then I walked out into the night. Not vindicated. Not victorious. Just free. The next morning, the phone rang. I let it buzz into voicemail. Then again. Then again. By noon, there were 5 missed calls from Natalie, 1 from my father, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize. Margaret's office line, maybe. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't listen to the messages. I didn't need to. The dinner had done its job. It had broken something. Not loudly, not with a scream, with a whisper that echoed deeper than they expected. By Friday, the fallout had begun to show itself. A mutual friend texted, "What the hell happened at Winford last night? Natalie looked like she'd seen a ghost." I didn't reply. Instead, I uploaded 3 photos. Not to my public account. Just my private, locked profile where only a handful of people still followed me. 1 image. The cake. 2nd, the wall of forgotten birthdays. 3rd, a printed quote on a napkin at the table. Some people need to be reminded what they chose to erase. No tags, no explanation. The post didn't need one. Within hours, I saw the views rack up. People I hadn't spoken to in years were watching the story. The old neighbors, former classmates, Natalie's old best friend from high school, even Margaret's yoga partner. They didn't comment, but they saw it. That was enough. A week passed. Then 2. I received a letter. Handwritten. Thick parchment. My name scrawled in my father's handwriting. I didn't open it. I burned it. Because whatever he had to say now was 2 decades late. Because apologies mean nothing if they only arrive when silence becomes inconvenient. Because I wasn't here for closure wrapped in guilt. Then something unexpected happened. I got a call from my old English professor. "You still write, right?" I blinked. "Sometimes." "There's a publisher looking for non-fiction essays, memoir pieces. Sharp, cold, unapologetic. Your name came up." I almost laughed. "Why me?" "Because someone read what you posted," she said, and they remembered. That word again. Remembered. Only this time, it didn't sting. It lit something. I spent the next 3 weeks drafting a piece. It wasn't a tell-all. It wasn't a revenge fantasy. It was a simple recounting of what it feels like to grow up as a footnote, what it means to be raised in a house where your absence is easier than your presence. How some families are built on performance, and how stepping out of that frame is the first act of rebellion. I didn't name names, but everyone who needed to recognize themselves did. When the essay went live, it trended for 3 days. The title? "The Birthday Table Was Never Mine." Comments flooded in. Thousands. People shared their own stories, forgotten birthdays, invisible childhoods. The quiet ache of being left out by the people meant to protect you. One woman wrote, "You wrote the exact pain I never had words for." A man messaged, "I was always the other son. I thought I was alone. Thank you." I replied to none of them, but I read every word. Because for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. And not by the people who forgot me, by those who had also been erased. A month later, I passed Natalie at the farmer's market. She saw me first. She hesitated, then approached. "You really went all out," she said, arms folded, mouth tight. I said nothing. "You embarrassed us. You made Dad cry." I raised an eyebrow. He finally had to see himself. Must have hurt. She looks down. "Margaret says you'll regret it." I met her eyes. Level. "I regret giving you all so many years to pretend I didn't exist." She didn't respond. She just stood there. A woman with everything, and no control left. "You wanted a party," she muttered. "No," I said. "I wanted acknowledgement. You mistook silence for permission." I walked away without looking back. Because what else was there to say? The dinner wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. And not everyone can stand to look in one. 2 months passed. By then, the noise had settled into a strange stillness. No more calls, no more letters, no attempts at reconciliation. And that was fine. I hadn't done it for a response. I'd done it to close the loop. You see, when people erase you long enough, they start believing you never existed in the first place. But then, you appear fully formed, unflinching, with every receipt in hand. And suddenly, they're the ones with questions. What did we miss? Why didn't she say something sooner? They don't realize. She did. They just didn't care to listen. I moved into a small apartment above a bookstore. It wasn't glamorous peeling paint, creaky floors, a window that stuck halfway, but it was mine. Every inch. I furnished it slowly. 1 chair, 1 lamp, a second-hand writing desk. No family photos on the wall. But on the shelf above my bed, I framed one thing. A scanned copy of that cake. To the daughter, you forgot to count. That single phrase had done what 25 years of hoping never could. It made them stop pretending. The essay had snowballed. First into a column, then a podcast appearance, then an offer to write a book. Memoir with teeth, the editor called it. Not trauma porn, not self-pity, just precision. I liked that word. Precision. It felt right, clean, like finally sharpening the blade after years of dull silence. So I wrote. Late at night, mornings before work, lunch breaks in the back room of the bookstore. Each chapter another brick I pulled from the walls they built around me. And by the end, there was nothing left to cage me in. Some nights, I still dreamed of them. Not in anger, not in grief. Just moments, scenes frozen in time. Natalie in her ballet costume, stepping on my foot backstage. Margaret handing her a congratulatory bouquet, while I stood in the background holding my own applause. My father sitting at the dinner table, nodding along to a story I hadn't told. None of it haunted me anymore, but I let it pass through me, like breath. I didn't resist the memories. They were mine, too. The book was published in late autumn. No fanfare, no launch party, just a small announcement, and a growing number of readers who messaged me quietly, privately, always with the same sentiment. You wrote what I was too afraid to say. I never needed to reply. Their words weren't for me. They were offerings to the selves they had hidden away. One day, I got an email from a woman named Lila. She said she was Margaret's sister. We'd only met twice. I read your book, she wrote. I always suspected something was off, but I didn't know how deep it ran. Thank you for making it impossible to look away. That email didn't fill me with pride or pain, just clarity. Sometimes the truth needs a witness, even if it arrives too late to change anything. Around Christmas, I passed the house I grew up in. It looked the same. Same shutters, same porch swing. But the mailbox now had only one name, Hayes. No, Rachel. No surprise there. Still, I stood across the street for a moment. Not with longing. Just inventory. Taking account of what used to be mine and what I was never allowed to claim. I didn't approach the house. Didn't knock. Didn't need to. Because I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the woman who wrote her way out. The woman who built her table when no one would offer her a seat. And that was more than enough. The bookstore where I worked wasn't big, 2 aisles wide, with creaky wooden floors and a bell that rang every time the door opened. Most days, it was quiet. Exactly how I liked it. One Thursday afternoon, I found a young girl sitting cross-legged in the corner. She held a copy of my book, half hidden behind a tower of fairy tales. Her face was pale. Her eyes were rimmed with that hollow look I knew too well, someone who had been made small for too long. She looked up, startled, when I approached. "You can sit there," I said gently. She blinked, nodded, didn't speak. I walked away, gave her space. An hour later, I found the book on the checkout counter. She hadn't bought it, just left it there like an offering. Inside, tucked between pages, was a note written in shaky blue ink. I didn't know someone could write what I feel. Now I do. Thank you. No name, no contact, just that. I kept the note, taped it to the inside of my closet door, right next to the old school photo of me at age 11, awkward, unsmiling, invisible. Not anymore. I was invited to speak at a local panel the following spring. The theme, Unwritten Histories. Each speaker shared a moment when their version of the story was erased by someone louder. I didn't rehearse. I stood behind the mic, eyes calm, heart steady. "My name is Rachel Hayes," I said. For most of my life, I was the person no one noticed. The empty seat at the dinner table, the girl cropped out of every photo, the birthday that never made it to the calendar. But I learned something. Silence is not the absence of truth. It's a tool, and when you learn to hold it the right way, when you cut through the noise with precision, silence becomes power. There were no cheers, no applause, just stillness. The best kind. The kind that meant people were thinking, feeling, recognizing themselves in the ruins. I didn't expect forgiveness from them. Never needed it. They never offered it either. And that, in a way, made things cleaner. More honest. Natalie moved to a different city. Margaret sold the house. My father remarried. To someone quieter. Someone less complicated. Fine. Let them keep building their curated lives. I wasn't part of that museum anymore. Years later, on my 35th birthday, I hosted a dinner. Not a grand event, just a table of people who had chosen me on purpose, over and over again. Writers, friends, found family. There was no cake with inscriptions, no photos taped to the walls, just warmth, laughter. A woman at the center of her own narrative, not forgotten, not erased, present, whole. Someone made a toast that night. "To Rachel," they said, glass raised, for carving a seat where none existed. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace, because I had done it. Without rage, without begging, just clarity, just stillness, and finally, a chair of my own.